On the 21st of February and the 15th of June respectively, I very suddenly lost two of the most important people in my life. On the 31st of August, I went abroad without them for the first time. And I decided to document that. My family and I have been staying here for over a decade, and when you've been staying somewhere for that long, it becomes familiar, like a second home. But this year, things were different. You see, grief is strange, and everyone experiences it at some point, but no one experiences it in the same way. It doesn't have a start point, it doesn't have an end point, and it can't be pinned down. For me, it warped my surroundings. As soon as I stepped into my apartment, I knew things were different. I felt disconnected from the world around me, and I quickly realised that anything I decided to photograph on this trip would automatically be affected by this. So instead of trying to avoid that or fighting it, I decided to document it and lean into it. I decided to start out by shooting where I was staying, and it was weird. I'd stayed here for years before, I'd even shot some of it when I was younger, but things were just different. Everything I saw, and everything I shot by extension, was unfamiliar and strange. So I decided to try and capture that. Portugal is incredibly sunny, and has literally no clouds, which means there's no diffusion for any light, and it casts these hard shadows pretty much everywhere. This, plus the white buildings, and the near perfectly groomed gardens, creates a really neat, almost suburban aesthetic. However, I also feel that, maybe because of my own connection to the photos, they have this aura of being clinical and detached, with a homely vibe kind of being countered by the lack of people and the lack of life in the photos, as there's this lack of movement in the shots. Of these initial photos, I feel that this one was probably my favourite. Visually, I really enjoy how neutral the colours are, and the idea of the closer crop and the tighter frame was really nice against some of the wider crops I showed earlier. The perspective of looking in the window is a classic, and I think it really works the representation of the distance I felt from my surroundings at the time, as if the viewer is looking in from the outside. After reviewing these shots, I decided to try and take my visuals in a different direction. I want to keep the clean-cut aesthetic, but instead launching it in a more abstract style. So I decided to leave the resort, and began to walk around the town, and shoot some of the architecture that was around. Aesthetically, I feel that these shots are some of the best I've taken on my trip. I really love how clearly defined the shapes are, and everything really honing in on that clinical, clean-cut aesthetic. The hard shadows plus the light colour of the buildings really strips back everything. And I think that's really nice, it's something I personally really enjoy. Especially with high exposure really emphasising all of the pastel tones in the buildings. But conceptually, I think they feel short. I feel a lot of the shots are really attractive and hold a lot of aesthetic value, but I don't think they really line up with my original concepts. Without sounding too egotistical, it almost feels like these shots are too pretty. The colours are too nice, everything is too clean cut, and it doesn't really embody the feeling I wanted them to embody. That feeling of detachment really isn't there in a lot of these shots. So, instead of getting frustrated, I took a break and tried to recapitulate and start fresh. In the final days of my trip, I didn't shoot as much. I took some shots in the early morning, I got some pretty nice photos at dawn, but I was getting frustrated. I was struggling to capture the original essence of what I actually wanted to capture. So, I decided to take a different approach. Instead of working around the harsh sunlight, I bought an admittedly cheap tripod that really didn't work that well, lowered my shutter speed and decided to shoot at night, where it finally felt like I found what I was looking for. I decided to try and physically distance myself from my surroundings, and try and create a scene. I started shooting far away from the buildings, and started focusing on some of the creepy, artificial light coming from the windows. I was trying to conjure this sense of voyeurism, as if the viewer's looking in on the scene unbeknownst to anyone else. Because to me, this is the best representation I could think of to reflect my feelings towards this trip. The concept of looking in on this scene from the outside, with this pretty, yet kind of unsettling vibe, really summarised what I wanted to embody in this project as a whole, especially when they're put side by side with some of the earlier shots I took during the day. Of the shots I took during my trip, I feel that these are probably my favourites. I feel the concept of looking in towards something visually represents the way I felt while shooting, as it felt like I was just detached. I was looking in towards something, but I wasn't really there, and it felt like it really embodied my original concept. I like the fact there's a sense of distance in all of them, and I think it really echoes the feeling of being on the outside and looking in, and I just really enjoy that. But overall, I think this entire project was strange. I didn't fly out meaning to shoot anything substantial, I wanted to take some tourist photos. But, as I said, as soon as I got into my apartment, I knew that I wasn't going to be so lucky. I knew things weren't going to work out the way I thought, because grief is strange. Though this is a really personal project that's quite close to my heart, and something that's genuinely pretty difficult to talk about, I'm glad I did it, I'm glad I shot it, and I'm glad I'm sharing it. It's very rare you get a chance to produce anything that forms as organically as this. And well, I'm proud.